Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and the Fool.
Hear about the open game license 2.1 or whatever it's called? 1.1?
Well, I was ahead of the curve because I was doing a Minecraft series, which I changed its name. Like, I was originally going to call it Dungeons and Dragons, but it's Dragons and Dungeons, and I started at the beginning calling it that, and I didn't use the ampersand in it. It's an and, not an ampersand.
I don't know if... Can they affect original... Well, I guess they could, technically.
Yeah, they can. It's within their attempted grab.
Right, because Critical Role has to change everything now.
Yeah, it's within their attempted grab. Legally, probably not.
Well, they could, though, because you... Well, it's weird, right? Because you can't just write a Harry Potter book and publish it.
Yeah.
But no one would care if you made a Harry Potter playthrough in Minecraft.
Yes, exactly.
Which makes the whole thing kind of weird, because theoretically, you're violating intellectual property by doing that. I wonder what the reason is there.
Kind of transformative.
Right, but it's transformative isn't enough.
And also, I think it's a...
Well,
they're just very...
Sorry, it's not transformative, though. Never mind. Transformative is enough, but that isn't transformative.
Also, it's not direct competition with the company, which is one of the other big things. So one of the things is I am using their thing to advertise myself. So that's one part, is I'm using an IP to help boost myself, so it's relative view off the IP. However, I'm not in any alignment with their product output. I'm not taking any of their audience. And then on the second factor is, they're giving me free advertisement, I'm giving them free advertisement. So it's the levels of which way is punching. And so it becomes this weird legal muddle.
But even then,
yeah.
You can... Giving people free advertising isn't an excuse in copyright law.
No, it is not.
But the audience bit probably does matter. But also video games are weird, because... Video games and YouTube specifically, because... Theoretically, you shouldn't be allowed to do playthroughs on YouTube. But video game companies like it.
Yeah, and any video game company that has tried to stop said thing has suffered massive consequences.
Like the Firewatch guys did it,
yeah.
And Phil Fish did it, I think. Unless he is the Firewatch guy.
I don't know, but...
But they're fully within their...
Yeah.
Well... They're probably fully within their right. I don't think it's being hashed out.
Well, there's also the whole thing of it's been going on so long. Was it common law? Which is a precedent setting of, you never stopped it in the first place, and it's gone so long. It's kind of become the reality of society that this is allowed.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. I wonder if you could consider it fan fiction isn't really legal either.
Yeah.
So
it's also really hard on the level. Someone I was watching us explain, board games are one of the hardest things in the world to copyright. Because
you can't copyright mechanics?
Yeah, so a company released a new game of Scrabble. I don't know who owns Scrabble. Might be even Hasbro.
Yeah.
Said, you can't do that. That's in our copyright. And so they added in an extra letter that doesn't exist, and they changed the shape of the board, and then Hasbro no longer had any legal recourse to go after them.
Yeah, I find that very confusing, because it seems to me obvious that you can't make a one-to-one replication of Monopoly, for example. Like, that seems like that would be straight up copyright infringement. Yeah. But, I guess there's patent and copyright as well, so it's even more confusing. Yeah. But
you can't use the Monopoly Man.
Yeah, but
you cannot copyright rolling a D6 to move across tiles.
Yeah. And so the open game license before was kind of weird, because... It just said you can...
Well, the OGL, it was there basically so people could actually make modules and then have them as a part of D&D, sort of unofficially, officially supported. It was actually designed for that.
I have a copy of it right here, actually.
Is that the original?
Yeah, it's
so small!
Yeah, it's a page long.
Why I'm saying it's so small is like the new one's something like...
I think it's 50 pages, or 70.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, no, the open game license used to be very small. And it has this great clause in it, actually, which is that if you are found in violation of it by not including it with your product, you have to Yeah, so termination. The license will terminate automatically if you fail to comply with all terms herein and fail to cure any such breach within 30 days of becoming aware of the breach. So basically, you can do whatever you want. And then if Wizard says, hey, you need to fix that, you can go, oh, sorry, fix it. It's actually really nice.
The new one is something like you have a 24-hour period to destroy if you do not comply. All things made, so if you like made little miniatures to sell as well that are supposed to be part of it, you actually have to destroy them.
Product identity means the product and product line names, logos, identifying marks, trade dress, artifacts, creatures, characters, stories, storylines, plots, thematic elements, dialogue, incidents, language, artwork, symbols, design, depictions, likenesses, formats, poses, concepts, themes, graphic and photographic and other visual or audio representations, names, descriptions of characters, spells, enchantments, personalities, teams, personas, likeness, special abilities, places, locations, environments, creatures, equipment, magical or supernatural abilities, effects, logos, symbols, or graphic design. So, poses, that's kind of weird.
Well, the spells thing, you can't copyright Fireball.
Anything that is theirs, you could. So if they invented fire, like you can't use Big B's floating hand in your game.
No, you cannot, but you cannot copyright a Fireball.
Probably, unless they were the inventors. They actually do list the things they own at one point, which is basically Displacer Beasts, Illithids, Beholders, and I think that's it.
Yeah, well, one of the thoughts I had even on this is, oh, you're getting very copyright happy there. The Tolkien estate wants to have a word.
And they also own, like, Elminster and Big B's Floating Hand, Melf's Minute Meteors.
Yeah. They own those things. They own the Forgotten Realms.
They own all the art. They own that and symbol.
Yeah, the dragon ampersand.
Yeah. And the Open Games license doesn't actually... This copy. So the Open Game license, you only have to include the part that's applicable to you.
Yeah.
So the full thing might be slightly longer than this. But I think it's only like 3 pages at most. But it's included with basically every copy of OSR products out there.
Yeah.
So it'll be...
But game mechanics, like, can they... Like, I think they might be able to copyright critical hits, but they can't copyright rolling a d20.
Right, yeah, because that's just an octahedron.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this copy...
I'm not even certain on the critical hits, so they can copyright that.
So this Open Game license here is 4 pages long.
Yeah.
But the reason is because they're listing all copyrights affected. So they list every single Gygax publication. That's why it takes an extra 3 pages. Because they reference the Gygax publications. So the basics of it are only a page long.
Yeah.
But then you have to include all the copyrighted material. And I don't really understand its existence, actually. I'm not a legal guy at all. But it doesn't actually give you permission to use any of their stuff.
No.
It just says... I don't even know, like, what it says. Like, it seems to me actually pointless because it doesn't give you extra permissions, you could essentially not include it. And, like, I don't think it gives you any extra benefits.
Might have just let you make things with their... Like, it lets you use their... Let's you say this is for D&D, right?
Oh, you can make original material for them.
Yeah.
Right. So, representation of authority to contribute. If you're contributing original material as open game content, you represent that your contributions are your original license creation, and you have sufficient rights to grant the rights conveyed by the license. So basically, I could sell a D&D module.
Yeah.
As a D&D module. But, like, Labyrinth Lord has no reason to include the open game license.
No.
I don't know why they are doing it.
Well, I mean, just now claim that you're a Pathfinder affiliated.
Yeah, well, Pathfinder uses the open game license as well. So you can't do that. You'd have to use GURPS or something.
GURPS or the other one, though, which is like generic. Is that? Oh yeah, that's generic roleplay system. Yeah, GURPS.
Or the other thing that you could do theoretically is Goblinoid Games could get rid of their open game license, and then everything could be based on Labyrinth Lord.
Yeah.
Dungeon Crawl Essentials, Dungeon Crawl Essentials could do that as well. Oh yeah. Okay, so cave crickets are copyrighted.
Huh.
Monstrous crabs, giant flies, wood golems, Kamadan, rot grubs.
I don't see the wood golem being copyrightable.
Says Tomb of Horrors. It's from Tomb of Horrors, copyrighted by Necromancer Games, authors Scott Green and Patrick Lawinger.
Yeah, well, I guess it's copyright, but it seems very similar to copyrighting an orc.
You probably couldn't have a wood golem with the same stats.
Yeah.
Which I assume they because it's Labyrinth Lord, they probably just took it.
Yeah.
Straight up. So they would have to get rid of a few creatures, or at least their specific stats.
Yeah. Try not to hold the piece of paper directly in front of your face.
Right.
You're also turning around a whole bunch in the multi. No, it's an odd move.
It's very similar to what Blizzard is doing with mods for Warcraft.
Oh, Blizzard's doing that?
They did that years ago.
Okay.
You remember that? They said that we own all derivatives.
Right,
yeah. You cannot make any. So we own everything about the derivatives you make. So basically, if Dota was made again, Blizzard would have full rights to Dota, and no one could make a Dota 2 Defense of the Ancients All Stars. No one could make.
See, doing that just stops anything from new game.
Whatever that Riot Games thing is called. Nobody can make. Yeah, nobody can make tower defense, elemental tower defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone's making stuff for them anymore. But yeah, they wanted to catch that in case the good stuff slipped through their fingers again. And all they had to do was do what Valve did and say, man, and what Riot Games did and say, wow, we really like what you guys are doing. Here's some money. Make it better.
Well, League of Legends and Dota 2 was basically the two heads of the Dota mod. One went to Valve and the other went to Riot. There's a literal split of the two heads.
If you look at RimWorld and at Witcher 3, so with Witcher 3, the Enhanced Edition that came out recently, they took a bunch of the top mods and included them in the game.
Ah.
And RimWorld goes even further. He would go to the top modders and hire them to be part of his company. He'd say, man, you make a lot of good mods, you want to work for me? And then he gets all the benefits of having these amazing developers on his team.
Yeah.
But then you have Blizzard and now Wizards of the Coast has always done stuff like this.
Yeah. No, I was reading the TSR days.
Yeah.
They also had like a huge
Yeah, they were very... I don't know if you
ever... wasn't there a legal battle basically between Gygax and the
Arneson?
Yeah, Arneson?
Yeah.
The Greyhawk campaign guy?
So if there's a... Gygax was Greyhawks. Arneson was Blackmore.
Oh, okay.
I think. So there's actually this very funny...
well, one of them had chainmail, right?
That was Gygax and Arneson.
Okay.
Mostly Gygax, though, I think. But they invented D&D together.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you watch Questing Beast at all, but he was talking about how he views how D&D should be played and how other people view it should be played. Yeah. And so he said, I think that D&D is just a starting point for this is what he calls it the grassroots game or something like that. It's just a starting point for a bunch of friends to follow a basic set of rules for imagination. And it doesn't matter what the company does. You can do whatever you want, and you don't have to worry about anything the company does because the game is purely under your control. Yeah. So this would be something like what Gary Gygax would say. And then he has this quote by Gary Gygax. And Gygax says, D&D is not meant to be played following the rules. It's meant to be just a game between friends in this shared imagination arena. And he said, now, there's another field of thought about D&D, which is that you can only play with the modules and there's a right way to play and a wrong way to play. And this is what I call the corporate version of D&D. And this is something that someone like Gygax would agree with. And so he gave a quote from Gygax from 5 years later when he was in that lawsuit, where he says, D&D, you must play all the modules. Anything else is a fraudulent version of the game and you are cheating. And because Gygax's vision was this open game. But when he got into the lawsuit with Arneson, then he had to defend his IP, so he totally changed his tune.
Yeah. Well, I see it as well, because some companies were given existing agreements already. I think beforehand, because they talked with people, possibly like Critical Role. I don't know if Critical Role is doing a whole change. But these, it's a lot like what Games Workshop did in a way. Alright, so our company's like going, it's so-so, it's okay, we got some properties, they're working out for us. Then suddenly we get this huge amount of fan stuff. We get like Critical Role, Astartes for Games Workshop, like all these fan projects. Oh wow, we're getting a lot of money now and we're becoming super popular. I want all the popularity for myself.
And so they kill it.
Yeah.
Well, there's a YouTube channel.
Well, Games Workshop has sort of fluctuated and gone quiet, but
I think he's called Into the Dungeon.
Yeah.
And his theory is that Wizards of the Coast really wants to push into the online space. They want to sell digital products that they have complete control over. They want everyone to play D&D with an online D&D playing system.
Yeah.
They want them to have like little automatic rollers, and if you want to play as a dark elf now, you have to buy the dark elf class rather than just make it up on the spot, because you can't just mod the computer program.
Yeah.
So that's his theory, is they're trying to really crack down and make it digitized, and he thinks there's going to be a divide between digital and analog.
Yeah.
And he thinks that the analog players like him are not going to be affected in the slightest by any of this, which I agree. Like, I don't care about the open game license.
Yeah. Well, another company that's been very clever is Tailspire, and that's that tabletop I showed you. They have not used a single copyright creature, and they do not affiliate themselves in any way, shape, or form with D&D, and that's why they haven't even built in systems in their games. You just have dice you can roll and things. They've been very clever in not even touching the open game license.
Is it moddable, or?
Yes, it is moddable. Yeah. People have modded the full monster manuals and character sheets into the game. The modding's a bit difficult because it's still a beta game, but still.
You can add in the eyeball orb.
Yeah. Well, even they have creatures that are generic. Like, they're bugbears. They have bugbears, but their bugbears don't look like bugbears. They look slightly different than D&D's bugbears.
Well, D&D has owlbears, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Owlbears might be copyright as well, actually. I'm not sure.
Yeah. They might have to remove the owlbear, because I actually do think they put an owlbear in their game, so they might have to remove that. But for them, it's very simple. They just delete the model.
Yeah. I guess you couldn't have references to other things. You couldn't invent a new creature and then say this was invented by Elminster. You couldn't say that anymore, because that would be playing upon their original property. But I'm still I don't understand game legal stuff at all, because I've heard many times you can't copyright mechanics, and that makes sense because copyrighting a rolling a d6 is ridiculous.
A d6 is one of the most basic game things ever.
But there's a lot of more complex things, like you can't copyright, I don't know, jumping or something. But what confuses me is you have patents, like Sega patented playing a game during a loading screen, and Warner Bros. Patented the Nemesis system from Shadow of War. And I don't understand the difference between those patents and those copyrights.
I think partly is because copyright lawmakers haven't caught up to digital copyright, because they just don't get it, because there's a bunch of old fogies. Partly.
Maybe, but how do you... So there is a game engine called VCMI, which is for Heroes of Might and Magic.
Yeah.
Except it's not, because legally you have to say that the game engine stands on its own.
Yeah.
But there is no assets that work with this game engine, except for Heroes of Might and Magic.
Yeah.
So there is a project for a guy who he is creating his own assets for the game so that you can have a completely standalone game.
Yeah.
And the thing I don't get is, what is considered an asset? Like, obviously, you can have creatures with attack, defense, and movement.
Yeah.
But can I have a pikeman with a different art asset who has the exact same stats as a Heroes of Might and Magic pikeman? And can he be in a faction of humans in the exact same arrangement? Because that seems to me like something Heroes of Might and Magic invented. Like, you can't just reskin a game and then you're good to go, right? Like that seems to me that shouldn't be allowed. Like, if you look at the Quest for Booty, I think it's called, it's a ripoff of Slay the Spire.
Yeah.
It's almost identical to Slay the Spire. All the cards have the same effects. All the character archetypes are the same. The map is the same. There is card crafting, which is slightly different, but that's more of a tacked-on mechanic. And that seems to me to be copyright infringement of some sort.
Well, War for the Overworld is very similar in a lot
It's similar,
of
but
ways.
it's not one-to-one.
Yeah.
They haven't copied the exact stats and interactions and units.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have
Horny
and the maidens and the warlocks and...
Yeah, they have no other creatures.
So...
But they have, like, goblins, which basically fill the same role as the imps.
So I'm very confused about the legality behind... It's one thing to say you can't copyright game mechanics, but what constitutes a game mechanic and what...
I think it might fall on a copyright judge looking and going, eh.
Yeah, I
think that's, like, about where it lies.
Because I was talking to a former patent lawyer, and he was saying, like, I was just chatting with him online, and he was saying that he doesn't think the Nemesis system would be defended in court. He thinks that if someone challenged it, they'd probably win.
Yeah.
And he could be wrong, because he said he's been out of the game for 15 years or something. And it would depend on the circumstances and everything. But who would challenge Warner Brothers for one thing? You need to be a big company as well, but probably. And you'd have to be fairly confident in that challenge succeeding. But I'm not sure... You can't just patent anything. So that it had to get passed in the first place. So forget challenging it. Someone did think they had a case for patenting it in the first place. And Sega's patent was honored for the full 15 years or whatever it is. That has expired, but I don't see anyone actually taking advantage of that still.
Well, probably because it affects load time slightly.
Probably, but not hugely. Like, if you think about a game like Pong or Rogue,
Yeah.
the amount of power they were running on is tiny compared to a game. And plus, if you're loading in a bunch of assets with your graphics card, your processor could have several threads doing nothing that you could dedicate to playing a small game. Rogue would actually be it's a complex game that takes basically nothing to run. You just plunk that in there. That'd be kind of perfect.
Yeah.
I've been playing it a little bit recently, and
Like the full ASCII Rogue?
yeah, the original Rogue, and it's really good. I'm always there's this weird loop with games, right, where a game is amazing,
Yeah.
and then you mod it and it's even better. But you know what's even better than a modded game? That game without any mods. and I see NetHack and Hack and Angband, they're kind of like mods of Rogue. They added more stuff. But the simplicity of Rogue is really quite nice. It's very straightforward.
Does Rogue have any luck besides the dungeon generation?
Yes. Yeah, there's chance to hit.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. There's D&D rules similar.
Yeah.
There's chance to hit. There's armor. There's randomized potions, randomized scrolls.
Yeah.
There's traps hidden about everywhere. Yeah, there's a lot of luck. The thing that I find really interesting about it, and maybe this is a sign of my age, maybe older people wouldn't think this is interesting. I don't actually know how computers used to work, like terminals. I've used DOSBox and whatnot, but I don't know, before mice were invented, I don't know what was used for navigation.
Arrow keys.
I don't know if they had arrow keys or not.
I think they did. I think arrow keys are the old holdover of mice. I think it's how you navigated through the little picker thing.
Maybe, because Rogue doesn't use the arrow keys. It actually uses something I think is a lot more ergonomic than arrow keys, which is how I've been able to play it. Because arrow keys, you're
making a little claw.
Yeah, and your middle finger's forced into a sort of unnatural position.
Yeah.
And so it's straining slightly. If you play a game with the arrow keys too long, it hurts. Whereas Rogue uses the H, J, K, L keys.
Huh.
So if you want to move left, you press H. If you want to move right, you press L. If you want to move down, you press J. And if you want to move up, you press K. And then if you want to move down and left, you press B. And if you want to move down and right, you press N. And if you want to move up and left, you press Y. And if you want to move up and right, you press U. So...
And is the arrow keys your selector, or are they basically...
It's how you move.
No.
Oh, the arrow keys, you don't use them.
Oh, okay.
No, all you use is the keys I just said, and then you use like W and R for wearing stuff, and Q for drinking, and E for eating, and
Okay.
the sort of standard roguelike buttons. But you...
Must have had a heck of a manual.
Not really, it's like a single page, but the instructions are a page. The manual's actually quite long, because he describes all the creatures and whatnot. But it's terribly written, because it doesn't explain it the way I did. What it does instead is it shows the rogue in the center.
Yeah. The @ symbol?
Yeah, and then it shows all the directions coming off of it and what letter you press for it.
Huh.
And it makes no sense when you're staring at it, because you're like, wait, if I want to move up, I press this button. But then directly below that button is the J, which is nowhere below the J on the keyboard. So you don't see a keyboard layout whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense in your brain. I think it would have been much better if they'd shown the directions as little arrows placed where the keys are on the keyboard.
Yeah.
So they replace the H with a left arrow and J with a down arrow and whatnot. And it's very comfortable actually.
Cool.
And you can mostly play with one hand. If you want to press like Control and right or something, it's a bit harder, but it's pretty cool. The arrow keys do work, but only for cardinal directions.
I've always had a lot of problem looking at ASCII games. I just can't do them.
It takes it takes a little bit of getting used to, but then there's also dyslexia might be a factor. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But there is tile sets for Rogue as well.
Yeah. I'm not interested as well to play Rogue.
Really? It's pretty fun.
Yeah, actual roguelikes in Rogue, I'm not that into.
You like D&D, though.
Yeah, D&D is different.
I think they're basically the same game.
I think they're quite different.
It is funny how there's... Actually, I've been wanting to talk about this for like a year or two, I think. Platonic ideals, basically. So it's interesting how... So you like D&D,
Yeah,
and I like D&D. And Rogue is an extension of D&D, but you don't like Rogue that much.
no.
So there's two main offshoots of Rogue, which are Hack and Band. Angband.
Yeah.
So Hack likes are based around... Character progression is based around the gear you find, and it's not permanent. So you tend to find potions and scrolls and magic items that are basically the same as your previous magic item, but maybe they have a +1 to them. But a rust monster is going to come along and eat it, and then you'll lose it, and you'll have to find a new one.
Yeah.
So constantly adapting, constantly changing. Your gear and your skills are based around what you're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Hack likes are based around character. Angband likes, band likes are based around your character progression. So your character gets stronger and stronger. They get new abilities. In Tome, your character, it's like Diablo. It's like turn-based Diablo, basically. You get a huge amount of abilities. Your character gets incredibly powerful when you level up. You do get tons of crazy gear, but your character themselves is getting permanently more powerful, and you're not thinking, okay, is this a potion of poison or healing or explosion? You're not worried about that too much.
Yeah.
It's more about the tactics of having a very powerful character and what you can do with them.
Yes.
And both of these games are direct copies of Rogue, where the developers just wanted to add a bit more to the game.
Yeah.
So Angband, they wanted to make it in... They're like, I want to make Rogue, but even better and set in the Lord of the Rings universe.
Yeah.
And NetHack was like, I want to make Rogue, but even better.
And set in a tourist destination. And
just throw in anything that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's basically what they did. Everything in the kitchen sink, literally.
Yeah.
And so they're both clearly roguelikes, but they are significantly different in design philosophy. And D&D, which Rogue is an offshoot of, is the same, where you can get a whole group of people that like D&D, and you say, oh, I all love D&D, and then I made a game that's like D&D, but even better and more so, right?
Yeah.
And so let's say two people say that, and you say, okay, so tell me about your game. Okay, well, first of all, there's no battle map, theater of the mind. And the characters, there's no levels, it's just all storytelling and discussion, right? And so that's what one person says. I made this game that's like D&D, but even better. Like, I made Nobilis.
Yeah. That's also actually kind of close to just the... What's that system called?
Fate?
Yeah, Fate.
Yeah, Fate's... Although Fate's like...
It's more straightforward than Nobilis.
But Fate's like theater of the mind with way too much paperwork. Like, you don't need 10... You don't need... No, it's like 40 stats or something. You don't need 40 stats to have a theater of the mind. In Nobilis, you only have your house and your keys, which I think is actually a lot simpler. It's a lot harder to learn.
Yes.
But the actual...
Just thinking of the Nobilis book.
Well, the problem is that...
Sorry, tome.
The problem is that they like writing.
It's huge.
It's hard to actually figure out the very simple rules, which are essentially, you're all gods, and you get to give yourself powers limited by some basic ideas, but there's no hard rules. And then you use those powers to interact with the world, and your injuries are also things. So if someone hits you with a fireball, you can say, I don't have any skin, therefore I'm not injured by it. And then that means that you've taken the injury of no skin. So it's just about stacking... You can think about it stacking buffs and status effects, essentially.
It's very weird.
And it's very cool. It's very creative. It requires a lot more thinking on the behalf of the players.
I still have no idea how to actually play it, even though we tried once. I have no idea what I was doing.
I've read the rules much more in depth now, and I think I could do a much better job of playing it. But it's very cool. It's very good for like a superhero system as well. They actually have examples based around superheroes.
Yeah.
You don't have to be gods, but it works. And that's D&D but better. Or you can say, okay, here's a game that's D&D but better, and you have Hackmaster. So combat is incredibly gritty. It's like gritty as in nitty-gritty details.
But somehow ridiculously fast.
Yeah, but the combat, it's faster, it's choppy, it feels great. You're killing stuff like crazy, you're getting all sorts of loot, actually they're not so much on the loot, but you've got rules for everything. You've got a critical hit table with 10,000 results, and you've got cleric
Tables for everything.
The cleric has 24 different gods they can worship, each with in-depth things they have to follow and benefits from worshiping the god. Like some of the cleric gods, like you cannot be restrained ever. The god of freedom, like that's just a class that you can pick from level 1. It's like god of freedom, you can't be restrained.
And then D&D, but better. Do you want 1,000 class choices, and do you want 1,000 race choices? In each class, do you want 1,000 subclasses?
And that's Pathfinder.
Yes.
Yeah. Or you can say D&D, but better. It's just a dungeon crawler. There's no story. It's just pure grinding through a dungeon, and that's Dungeon Crawl.
Yeah.
And
Dungeon Crawl. Yeah, sorry, Dungeon Crawl.
Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's Labyrinth Lord, and that's first edition D&D.
Yeah.
Or you can say it's like D&D but better, and it's based on West Marches. Sorry, it's West Marches, so it's based on Keep on the Borderlands. Yeah. So that's like first edition.
Or D&D but better, which is going back to Fate, but the other Fate systems, which is Vampire the Masquerade, which is...
And Dresden Files.
Yeah, they're roleplay heavy, but they have defined rules.
Well, the Dresden Files, I think that's Eclipse phase, actually, I think. But what they do is kind of weird how you can make your character have any ability you want, like in the Dresden Files role-playing system. So you can say, okay, he shoots out a fireball that creates like a miniature sun that implodes and sucks everything into it. And it's like, okay, well, you're level 3, so that did 3 damage. Yeah. Like, I hate that.
Yeah. No, I tried running a system with that. Like, I was trying to use from my knowledge of it. And my players kept going, well, that's kind of lame.
I would much rather have a system where the only spell you can have is a fireball, no matter what. Yeah. But you can make that fireball do whatever you want. Yeah. Like, this fireball does 10 million damage. This fireball freezes people in time. I'd much rather have that than the Eclipse phase system of you can do whatever you want, but the mechanical side is incredibly limited.
Yeah, no, I know a little bit of Vampire Masquerade is like it's usually nowhere near as combat focused, and when you get into combat, if your characters get hurt, high chance of them dying, even though they're vampires, and there's like terrible injuries and mental scars you get, so it's very punishing.
And I think Nobilis actually probably has the best compromise here, because when someone attacks you with a power of 3, that you're probably going to take a tier 3 wound. Like, that's it. Except you get to choose what that wound does. So even though it's a tier 3 wound, it can do a huge amount of
the confusion's all coming back to me.
Well, we made the mistake.
Tier roleplay.
The problem with Nobilis we made is using the character generator, which is absolutely terrible.
Yeah, also, Nobilis is pure roleplay.
Kind of.
There is no leveling up. There is no...
You can level up, I think, but I'm not sure how.
You have character development.
Right, no, it's actually really cool. They have a quest system. Each character has...
Yes, no, that's what I say. Later, you have character development.
Each character has like a mind palace, and every time you add to the mind palace, it furthers your goals towards certain things. Yeah. And if you complete like 6 goals in one area, it like unlocks like a big mind palace thing, and then if you unlock like 3 big mind palace things, then your character grows and learns. But you can do stuff...
I had a wolf that wanted to be a person in a suburban city.
But you can do stuff like, I had a kid, therefore this ties into the fact that my parents were killed, and it overcomes that because I will be the parent that I never had. And therefore, I gain like +1 in the House of Leaves.
It sounds it's like actually a really, liberal arts role-playing game.
It's really cool.
It is, actually.
It's very hard to implement well, I think, but it is a neat idea. I wish they had a much better rule book.
I need to find like a master game master of Nobilis. Just, can I please play with you so I understand this game?
One thing that I found really helped was I read a transcript of gameplay. And it was just some friends like goofing around with a superhero fight. And it makes way more sense when you're like, oh, it doesn't, like, you can make Nobilis the super deep, like, moving thing, but you can also just have dumb fights between gods.
This path, poof.
Like, yeah, like I summon my horde of undead to take over the city, and you can do that sort of thing too. I also
Nobilis is closer to the role playing system.
Phase Rip and
that civilization creating game.
Oh, Microscope.
Yeah, Microscope, where you use a lot of sticky notes.
Yeah,
like I think it's closer to Microscope than D&D. Maybe?
No, I would disagree, actually. I think it's closer to D&D. Because Now, what would be really... Oh, no, it'd take too long. But I was thinking you could play Microscope and resolve actions with Nobilis. That'd be really
So
interesting.
you're talking about Malice and Book of the Fallen?
Kind of, yeah, except they used GURPS. But I think Nobilis would be amazing for that. Actually, they should have used Nobilis for Malice and Book of the Fallen, really. I think that would have worked better.
I think they also just wanted to play a role-playing game.
Yeah. If you can find some of the out-of-print copies, I think it's called the White Book of Nobilis. It's...
Way smaller?
Yeah, it's like a fifth the size or something. It was before they wrote the Pink Book where they added all the extra fluff.
I am a god of arcane wibbly-wobbliness. Oh, I'm a god of wibbly-woobliness.
So the secret to reading Nobilis...
Is ignoring all the fluff?
No, it's ignoring like everything. And only looking up rules when you need them.
Yeah.
From the start. Like, you sit down and you say, okay, we're playing Nobilis. And then it's like, okay, I want to move. All right, we'll look at the movement rules. like do it that way, and it becomes much more structured.
Yeah.
Because maybe make your character, and that's it. But even making the character can be a nightmare if you
Don't follow their character maker.
follow the rules too closely. Yeah.
Otherwise, you end up with a sentient wolf in a suburban town that has no idea what's doing it.
Yeah. Do not use the deck of cards system for character generation. It's a nightmare. That's for, I don't know, advanced players maybe, or no one. I'm not sure, but it's a nightmare. But so basically, you have this pure idea of D&D, which is actually wargaming, but better.
Yes.
And it makes it kind of weird about Platonic ideals, because you can say there's a Platonic chair, which all chairs are based on.
Yeah.
So a Platonic shape or a Platonic form is the ideal perfect form that we are moving towards in order to, whenever we perform an act of creation, we move towards this shape. So a Platonic circle is a perfect circle. Platonic shapes are very understandable. There is actually a Platonic equilateral triangle. There is a Platonic circle. There is a Platonic cube. There isn't a Platonic rectangle, really, if you think about it, because rectangles can have all sorts of shapes. But when you get into Platonic forms, it gets kind of weird, because let's take the example of a sword.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a bronze sword, and you say, I want this sword to be better. Does it become a steel sword, or does it become a longbow? Because what is it? What do you want to be better? Do you want the weapon to be better? Because it's a sword and it's a weapon.
Well, even here,
what is a weapon? A weapon is a thing for getting things done.
Yes, but even between... So swords are a very interesting one. I like that you pick swords. Because a longbow is a ranged weapon.
Yeah.
A spear is better than a sword. Basically, in 98% of conflict.
Yeah.
Like, one of the few places where you'd rather have a sword is in a stairwell.
I think the simplest way to think about swords and spears is rifles versus handguns.
Yeah, but also...
You're not going to carry a spear around with you.
Yeah.
You'll carry a sword around with you. If you're at a party, it's okay to have a sword. It's okay to have a handgun. If you're fighting in close space, you want a sword, not a spear. Yeah.
But the sword is artistic. And so you say a steel sword or a bronze sword. However, some of the bronze swords that were made, bronze is actually a lot more pleasing looking metal than steel.
It's also waterproof.
Yeah. And it is malleable, much more malleable, much easier to pound into shapes and fold. And so, although it couldn't be quite as long as the steel sword, so again, it's not as good because is a sword a long thing?
Yeah.
Well, Zweihanders get a little too long. But you could have a very nice looking bronze sword. Is that the ideal sword? Well, then why not make the sword out of gold if it's for the appearance of swords? Because swords are ceremonial, the symbol of knighthood, the symbol of the king.
Or is a better sword a sword that doesn't break? So you make it out of tungsten. But steel has a certain amount of give, which makes it stronger in some ways because it can deform, whereas tungsten can't.
Yeah. A tungsten sword also, if you hit something, would jar your arm.
Yeah, like the tungsten sword probably won't break, but it's not going to be comfortable to use. Yeah. Whereas steel is, I think, as far as we have materials today, steel is the best object in terms of recoil for a sword.
Yeah, and also steel armor is the best armor for stopping a sword, because some people actually do wear titanium because it's lighter and it has the same strength.
But until like plasteel is invented, I think steel will be the material.
But the problem with titanium and why titanium is often not allowed, especially in helmets, is titanium doesn't vibrate like steel. And so it doesn't...
jars you.
Yeah, it doesn't distribute the force like a steel helmet does. So you cannot have a titanium helmet, even though in some cases it's actually stronger and lighter.
Yeah. Yeah, and like shark-resistant armor is made of titanium.
Yeah.
But sharks aren't whacking you like a baseball bat. They're applying pressure.
Yeah.
So you want something that won't buckle.
Yes.
Whereas if you're getting... Like, in combat, a knight isn't putting a rock on you and pressing on it until your armor breaks.
Yeah.
They're whacking you repeatedly. And I guess, yes, sharks are applying constant pressure, I guess.
I mean, you could also have depleted uranium plate, but that'd be very heavy.
Yeah.
And your depleted uranium actually has the property similar to steel of it nullifies force, like it just takes it in, but it's too heavy.
And I also wonder, like, I don't know, but I think you don't really get much stronger than titanium anyways.
Yeah. And
titanium's super light.
Yeah.
The thing is, titanium costs a fortune.
There's that.
Yeah.
It doesn't vibrate.
Yeah. So if you want the better sword as well. Yeah, so like you're saying, so if you make it out of titanium, like what is the quality of a sword that makes it the platonic sword? Or is it a sword that you want? So let's say you have a magic wand that makes an object better, right?
Yeah.
It just makes an object better. It can only do it once. And it makes the object a better version of itself.
It adds a +1 to it.
No, it adds a completely random amount of betterness to it.
No, but I'm saying to make something better in totality, it's a +1. So it's +1 beauty, +1 sharp, +1 strong.
No, it has to turn it into a real object. It can't just magically enchant it.
Yeah.
Your magic wand isn't... There's no magic involved. Okay, so you take your magic wand and...
My magical wand of hypotheticals.
Yeah. You make an object better by some unknowable amount. Perhaps to the point where it is better in every way, but that gets complicated. So we'll just say it has to be better.
Yeah.
And you hit your sword with it. If you hit your bronze sword with it, what is the interpretation of the better? Because without saying the words, I'm saying the word sword so I can describe a thing.
Yeah.
But what I actually want is the action of you hitting the object with the wand. Do you get a machine gun, or do you get a plasteel sword, or do you get a diplomat that can win any kingdom for you?
Or do you get a button?
Or do you
and you press it and someone dies?
Yeah. What?
Or do you get the Mona Lisa?
So what is a sword? And then you say, well, a better sword is a steel sword. But steel's interesting because besides its shock absorption, it's not the best at basically anything.
Yeah.
Bronze swords are more waterproof, they're prettier, they're easier to work with.
Yeah.
You
can repair them a lot better. They actually, because steel, when it gets damaged, this crystalline structure changes.
Yeah, the high grade steel especially.
Yeah, whereas bronze, you just
whack it with a hammer and it's good to go. Yeah. You can say a tungsten sword doesn't break as easily. Yeah. You can say a diamond sword would cut through more, or an obsidian sword more reasonably would cut through things easier. Of course, I think the obsidian sword would probably shatter easier than a steel sword.
Obsidian sword, if they don't have armor, obsidian swords are amazing. I was actually reading about thoughts on the Aztecs and why they had the obsidian sword and why they're so obsessed with it to a certain extent. And the conquistadors, a lot of times they found while they're in those jungles, they didn't even want to wear their chest plates because the metal got so hot. Like, those conditions were awful for metal armor and armor in general. And so they would take off their breastplates because it was preferable to fighting without that against someone than with the protection it gave.
Mm.
And so then the Makutl becomes a far more optimal weapon because if you're not wearing armor, it goes straight through flesh.
Yeah. You could say like a aerogel sword would be lighter.
Yeah.
Whatever, or what, aerospace gel, whatever that stuff's called that they use to separate, to insulate the rockets. Or is a sword a cooling device? Like, if you hold a piece of metal, it's going to radiate more heat out of your body. Yeah. So is the best sword like a giant radiator?
Or would become a dumbbell because it's an exercise device.
Yeah. Or does it become like a Tai Chi instructor because it's a martial arts device?
Yeah, or does it become a vibrating bowl?
Yeah.
Because it's meditation.
So the idea of a...
Well, this is the Platonic ideal. Plato's ideal?
Yeah, Platonic form.
Yeah, and it's from Plato. And this is one of the problems that philosophers have with his works on these thoughts, is what is the perfect chair? That was the example my philosophy teacher used.
Like, is a perfect chair a reclining chair, or is it one that, like a walking desk, or is it one where you never have to get out of it, or is it one that builds muscle on the...
Yeah.
Or is it a chair that doesn't break?
Is it rigid and allows you to pay attention better?
Because a lot of the time, I think the Platonic ideal, it focuses on the opposite end of what is a chair.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, we're asking what is a chair, right? But a way a lot of people do it is they go the opposite way. They don't say what's the best. They say at the lowest point. Is a stump a chair? Is a rock a chair? Is it? Yeah. But I was thinking about the reason I'm thinking about it is because there is an object in a book I'm writing that does exactly what that magic wand does. And it's completely stumped me because I've been thinking, okay, what on earth does this do? Now, obviously, I think it should just be based on the interpretation of the user. So if the person says, if the person's thinking, I want a better weapon, they'll get a better weapon. If I want a more waterproof sword, they'll get a waterproof sword, etc.
Well, so I was thinking out of the short story I was writing, where a guy actually has the Platonic sword as a weapon. However, he encounters a man with the Platonic weapon. So there's the Platonic sword versus the Platonic weapon. And the person with the Platonic weapon is far scarier.
Sort of, but a Platonic sword, what is a sword? Because it's everything that a sword is, whereas a Platonic weapon is only a weapon.
Yes.
But a Platonic sword looks good at parties, makes you work out, it's waterproof.
Yeah, well, so they have their difference. The Platonic weapon is very good at killing people.
If that's what weapons are for. Because Terry Pratchett would argue weapons aren't for killing people, they're making it so you don't have to fight them.
Yeah, fair enough. Even then, there's a lot of interpretation.
So the Platonic weapon could again be that diplomat that just says, you don't want to do this, buddy. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or the Platonic weapon could be like a bag of gold that you can just...
Well, the thought of the idea is these are concepts. So they actually don't look like any... Like, you look at them and you know it's a sword, but it doesn't have any describable appearance.
But what is a sword and what is a weapon gets to the point of... Like, what is a weapon for? Is a weapon for intimidation? Is it for security? It's for all of those things.
Yes.
But a sword...
You're the king if you have the Platonic sword.
And you're good looking. Because swords look good.
They're fashionable.
They're cool. And you're dashing and you're clever.
Protector.
And you're skilled. You're
noble.
I think there's a reason that heroes tend to have swords in stories.
Yeah.
Because anyone can pick up a stick and poke someone with it.
Yes.
Although, really, anyone can pick up a sharp club and hit someone with it, really. But there's a finesse associated with swords that don't make them often called sharp clubs or something like that. That's more what axes get put to. But an axe is really just a sword that isn't playing around with all the extra bits.
Extra fluff. And it's also a tool. An axe can be a tool at the end of the day.
An axe is basically a cheap sword. If you think about it, like, it's got all the same bits. It's not wasting material.
Can the Platonic sword cut down a tree? Because the Platonic axe certainly can.
Can it? And this gets kind of weird because, like, a machete is a tool for getting through jungle, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, can you use a sword to cut down a tree? Or would that be bad for the sword?
It's bad for the sword.
But it's not bad for the axe.
No, that's what the axe is made for.
Yeah, but they're kind of the same object.
Yeah, but the sword's not made for cutting down a tree.
But it's kind of weird, isn't it? I guess it's because of the wood. The axe absorbs
Maybe
the
Platonics comes from what the thing is made for.
Yeah, well, that was sort of my resolution, was what you want from the object.
Yeah, because I see, like, the Platonic sword couldn't cut down a tree.
But that would mean that the Platonic ideal is contingent on the observer, which is similar to how
Which is very quantum.
Well, it was what I was trying to say about how beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Hey, careful with that.
Beauty's in the eye of the evil eye. Because there is natural qualities within each thing, but the thing that brings them out is the observer.
Yeah.
So you cannot say that the pile of dung is more beautiful than the rose, but you need the observer to make the rose beautiful.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain amount of beauty within...
I feel like Plato in his Platonic thing was actually trying to get away from that, and the Platonic chair is...
a chair among...
chairs.
Which all chairs are superior to all chairs in every way. I think that's the other...
Like, that was the thing that Plato was actually trying to get to as well.
Yeah, but even the problem with that is, let's say this wand now.
Yeah.
It makes the object better in every way.
Yeah.
You hit the sword with it. Do you get the Death Laser 5000, or do you get a lightsaber?
Mm.
What is the best form of an object still?
Yeah.
Is
Well,
it
I think the death laser might go away from. It's no longer a sword, so I think it has to stay a sword to be the platonic sword.
But is it a sword in front of you, or is it a weapon, or is it an art piece, or
Yeah.
is it a role playing piece of gear? Like if you take your plastic sword, right?
Yeah.
You hit it with this wand. Do you get a lightsaber, or do you get like a full suit of authentic 17th century armor because it's the best role playing gear?
Or with the plastic sword, do you get friends? Sorry, not.
Well, no, like
Because you're saying role playing. I was thinking about plastic swords as a toy.
Yeah, yeah.
So originally I was going to say, do you get a bunch of little toy soldiers?
no, but you're right. As friends, like you see it as a means to communicate with people and engage together with them, and so the end, an object can be looked at as well, means to an end, obviously.
Yeah.
But the Platonic ideal almost seems to suggest it's an end in of itself, but the end is indeterminable by humans. So and we are the ones creating, so we are the ones that want the like I know Sargon really doesn't like the idea of Platonic ideals. He thinks Plato is responsible for a lot of the problems we have today because people are.
He also doesn't like Kant.
I think he.
Although he espouses his ideals quite often.
Well, I think that he hasn't looked at. So when we talked about Kant, we showed the inherent contradiction with Kant of you must always do good, but you don't know what good is.
Yeah.
So the only good you can do is the attempt to do good.
Yeah.
And so what we derived from that, which maybe wasn't what Kant intended, maybe Sargon's more correct about this, but I don't think he was. I think Kant did intend what we came up with as a resolution to the paradox, which is all you can do is strive.
Yeah.
And so the act of good is an act of striving and constantly refining and going into chaos. And that's where the infinite stair came from and all of that.
Yeah.
Which is the universal story of humanity. So it would make sense that would be in alignment with what Kant said. Because it would be surprising if Kant wasn't aware of that. And if he wasn't aware of it, you would still think it could be derived from first principles given that we did it in the first place as humans. But I think that Sargon sees Kant and Plato as idealists who sacrifice reality for idealism. And so he thinks that Kant's prescription of you can't lie is absolute. Whereas I would argue that you can't lie is a best guess at what is good. But there may be situations under which you should lie.
Yeah.
And I think there is, because there's always a smaller... You can always zoom in and find that little exception.
Yeah, well, you come up with exceptions even with the Kantian frame, because you don't kill people in the Kantian frame, because killing people is wrong. However, I came to a conclusion within this that there is appropriate, and some people might view it differently, there is an appropriate time to kill people, which is stopping someone else from getting killed.
Yeah. Or, okay, so here, this is where it gets even...
And it's not like, oh, this person has the potential to kill them. No, they're pulling out the gun and pointing at the person, and they're going to shoot them. Then you can kill them. But it's like, oh, this man has the potential to kill people. Well, they have the potential. Anyone does.
I think there's even more justifiable situations than that. Like, if someone, like Darkseid, let's say.
Yeah.
You have him at your mercy. You can't contain him. He's far too powerful to be contained. But
you have the can't contain, which was important.
You have him weakened. At that point... letting him go might not be the right choice.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And I'm not certain on this idea, but...
Well, I think that Avatar The Last Airbender was brilliant in that Aang didn't kill the Fire Lord.
They kind of chickened out, though, by giving him a third option, I think.
Yeah.
But there does tend to be more options than you think, so there is that. And it is a kid's show. But
yeah,
I think Aang should have killed him.
I don't. Because... So, the Lion Turtle before... Like, they changed what it said, but it said that, was it, don't be evil, basically?
I don't know.
But the whole idea is that every single Avatar in the past is told you have to kill the Fire Lord. And everyone else is saying you have to kill the Fire Lord. But Aang's personal beliefs as an individual is, I don't kill. Ignore all the people he's knocked off tall buildings and into water. But so his idea, I don't kill. That's a core part of his character. And so it's Aang versus the universe. Literally, the Avatar state is universal. It is the force, the will of the universe for balance. And so when he's fighting Ozai, and he defeats Ozai. And then Ozai says, "You're weak," because he doesn't kill him. Then Ozai basically capitalizes on Aang's weakness, and Aang is weak there because he didn't kill him. However, there's also the argument that Aang's strong because he chose not to take the option of death.
I don't think Aang's weak at all for not killing him.
Well, I don't either. I think Aang is strong,
but I still don't think that's necessarily the right choice.
Even if Aang didn't have the taking away bending for good, like part of the taking away the bending is Ozai's symbol as Fire Lord is he can firebend. But even then, Aang could have incapacitated him as he did, like the whole bending his arms up. And there is prisons for firebenders. Like, you don't need to take away bending. You could imprison Ozai in a place which he can't firebend in. And then other stories survive it. But he's imprisonable. He doesn't have to be killed.
But what is imprisonment? Like, it's kind of torture, right? Like, it's not a kind thing to imprison someone.
No.
And
well, that's weird because your best friend, has one of the strangest outlooks on prison, which a lot of people don't have. Like, I have the thought on prison of, although it's decayed over time, of trying to re-citicize people.
Yeah, but you can't do that with Ozai, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't redeem Ozai, theoretically.
Yeah, but your friend has the thought of prison of it's making them suffer as much as possible. So it's like, why give the murderer the easy out of execution when you can make every single day of their life, it's very French actually, every single day of their life in prison a misery that they must suffer.
Which is kind of like, did Aang abandon morality just so he could feel better about himself? Sometimes you have to make a hard choice to do the right thing. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't listen to what your gut says. I think that's important. And I'm not saying you should be like Hitler and use your rationalism to overcome your compassion, and so that you can deal with the Jews as they need to be dealt with. But I think that locking someone in prison could be an easy out so you can wash your hands of the guilt of doing what your responsibility. An example I can give is when you give an alcoholic alcohol because they're suffering.
Yeah.
It makes you feel better because you see them stop suffering. But you're actually prolonging their hurt and their injury. So Aang could be choosing to like, when you see Azula when she's in prison, she'd be better off dead. Like, she's
insane.
She's absolutely insane. Now maybe you can there's an aspect of humility here. Maybe someday in the future she will be better.
Yeah.
And maybe someday in the future Ozai will be better.
Well, there is the thought of Christ the Redeemer, which is anyone can be redeemed.
But so,
and is it Aang's judgment to say if Ozai is redeemable or not? Like, is he allowed to make that judgment?
Aang breaks the earthbenders out of prison, and he breaks the waterbenders out of prison. Prisons, obviously, but also within the universe itself, are not inescapable. Ozai could someday escape a prison.
Yeah.
And when he escapes, his power is such that he could kill hundreds or thousands of people fairly easily. He's a very, very powerful man.
Yeah.
That he can go toe-to-toe with the Avatar in the Avatar state, and it's not guaranteed. Like, he is a very, very powerful person. That was during the comment and everything, but still.
Also, he didn't stand a chance against the Avatar state. He could go toe-to-toe with the Avatar.
Well, if he took the Avatar by surprise in the Avatar state, he could kill them, like Azula did.
Yes.
Like, he wouldn't be he's not an idiot, right? No. He breaks out of prison. He's going to wait until Aang's sleeping, and then he's going to incinerate him.
Yeah.
And there's no other guard in the Aang's house that is going to be able to stop him.
Yeah.
So, by putting him in prison, you are saying, I will take the chance at Ozai's redemption, weighed against the lives of these thousands of people, potentially, that he could kill. Now, again, humility comes into it. I think Captain America, funnily enough, said it best in Infinity War. We don't trade lives.
Yeah.
You take morality one step at a time.
Yeah.
You say, the right thing to do is to give Ozai a chance at redemption. The right thing to do is stop him if he tries to kill those people.
Yeah. It's
not for us to kill someone on the chance that they do this again.
Yeah.
But I've been reading a lot of these superhero books, and they all do this very weird thing where in the middle of gunfights and whatnot, the heroes work very hard not to kill anyone. And to the point of I'm trying to think of an example from that you would know. Like Joker might be the closest. There's characters like him. There's a character called Pencil. He's invulnerable, and his sister, that's his only power. So he's not actually that dangerous on his own because you can restrain an invulnerable person.
Yeah.
But his sister's power is that she can ask an impossible question and you will devote all your mental resources to trying to solve it. So if you get him locked down, his sister comes in, asks you a question, and then you're completely trapped, and then he can go and kill you or do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
So as a pair, they're very dangerous. But there's a point where they have he is a serial killer who tortures and kills hundreds, if not thousands of people. Constantly, he's been, like, every couple days, there's another story about him murdering someone. He's a rampaging serial killer, clearly beyond redemption.
Yeah.
Like what was his name? Buffalo Bill, was it? Or his last words were something like, "I wish the entire world had a single neck so I could wrap my hands around it and squeeze."
I'm not familiar with yours. That was, but
yeah, there's people like that out there that are just dark people, and so Pencil's like that. They have one of his cultists captured at one point. Another he has a lot of very powerful people around him, and they have that guy at their complete mercy. And this guy is very dangerous. He can shoot explosive spikes off of his body at will that cause whatever they hit to explode and turn.
Yeah.
So he's very dangerous. And they tie him up and throw him in a closet. And it seems to me fairly obvious this guy can escape, and then he could end up... They're in a children's hospital. This guy is actively trying to kill those children. And they tie him up and throw him in a closet so they can go and try to stop the other supervillains.
Yeah.
It seems to me that when there's like 10 supervillains trying to kill children in a children's hospital, and you can't really properly restrain them, going out of your way to not kill them doesn't seem to me to make sense. And these books their characters don't seem realistic to me in that...
Well, it's very easy to kill people. That's the thing with Superman and Batman. For both of them.
Yeah, well, it's like people don't understand Batman or something, is what I'm sort of thinking.
It's very easy for the two of them to kill, and if they start taking that easy solution, neither of them will stop. And in Gotham, you know who Conrad Kurz is from Warhammer?
No.
Okay, so he's one of the Trader Primarchs.
Right.
And he's basically Batman if Batman killed people. So his planet of Nocturne has no criminals because they're all dead.
Right.
And if anyone commits a crime, they get killed. Like even the smallest crime.
So I think that's an important aspect is...
And it's because he basically... if I kill one person, it's super easy, so it solves the problem, so I'll kill anyone.
I'm not saying that all the heroes should act like the Punisher or RoboCop.
Yeah.
Because the difference there is the Punisher has everyone at his mercy. He's a very powerful, very skilled individual.
Yeah.
These superheroes are way over their head, fighting for their life. They're losing. And there's children's lives at risk. And they're still not pulling every trick out of the bag in order to secure an advantage. It's one thing if Superman decides not to kill.
Yeah.
He's very rarely the underdog. It's another thing if you need to get a handle on a situation, and when you have a chance to... I'm thinking, like, imagine an XCOM, right? If there was an option to knock out the aliens, and they stay unconscious for 4 turns.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, there is. You use smoke on them. Okay, so XCOM. But for some reason, you go about just... Players don't go around just using smoke on all the aliens and knocking them out.
Mm. When you capture the last few.
Yeah, but the reason you don't do that is because while you're then in the middle of a massive firefight and you're barely holding on, the aliens you knocked out wake up behind you.
Yeah.
And they come and shoot you in the back. And so what you do is you secure the perimeter, you kill all the aliens, and then you go in with your stun batons and take out 2 or 3 that you bring back with you.
Yeah.
They're not doing that in these superheroes. They're not securing the perimeter. They're just knocking them out, leaving them completely unattended, and then running off and then trying to fight these other villains at a huge disadvantage. And then, at the worst possible time, the old guys get back up and they jump in. And I find it weird that I'm arguing on the side of the easy way out because, in a sense of, because I'm not a fan of the pragmatism of murder typically, but I think there might be a point for. Then there's the humility thing again. It's very hard to. So one thing they do though, right? There's murder is completely off the table.
Yeah.
But then there's a comedy scene where one of the villains, who's not really a bad person, I don't know if you've heard the phrase "the pirates who do nothing." But it's like all the characters in a movie might be pirates, but none of them seem evil, even though piracy's pretty evil.
Yeah.
These supervillains are not evil. Like, except, like that guy Pencil and his gang, like the villains and the heroes team up to fight them, and they consider them like an evil among evils type of thing. Which, I mean, I guess like you're a lawyer who does tax fraud versus you're a serial killer. There is a degree there. But still, the villains never do anything bad, and they're always... It's a shame I don't trust the author enough here, because they're always justifying themselves as like, well, capitalism's a corrupt system, and the banks have insurance for the money I'm stealing, and it's like, yeah, do you know why the bank rates are so high? Because they need to buy insurance. You're still hurting people. It's like the Golem says to Moist. Moist is like, I've never hurt anyone. It's always stolen from people that could afford it. You've
killed 3 points.
You've killed 2.2 people.
Yeah.
It's like,
well,
and so...
Do you know about... The Red Sun? Superman the Red Sun?
Where he becomes communist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, he, at one point, like, he's Stalin's basically adopted son. He sees the evil, the gulags that Stalin has. And I think Superman actually kills Stalin in that or something. And then because he has super advanced technology and he's super powerful, he starts, instead of gulagging people, he lobotomizes social dissidents and puts like super chips in their brain and makes them public servants. And he has a fight against Batman, and Batman the Red Sun is a terrorist. Like, he's a full-blown terrorist. He kills a bunch of cops, he blows up a bunch of buildings, he destroys a museum, and it's all basically get Superman's attention for his ideals of revolution out of the communist system that Superman has imposed. And they fight each other in Batman's setup layer, and so Batman wins. And then he has Superman trapped, and he's going to slowly die from red sun radiation. Anyways, Superman manages to get out of it, and he's going to go and he looks at Batman and is like, I'm not going to kill you, I'm going to help you. And he says, I'm basically going to lobotomize you. And Batman blows himself up because he has a bomb implanted in his chest, so he can't even have that happen. And so that Superman doesn't kill people because killing people is bad, but Batman sees that as a fate worse than death.
Well, that's what I see what Aang kind of did to Ozai, potentially. He can't even be honest enough to kill Ozai. He has to lobotomize him. He has to restrict his movement. Because the body and the mind are linked, right? When you put someone in prison, you restrict their mind.
Yeah.
And now, Christopher Hitchens has an argument against the death penalty, which, if I recall correctly, is something along the lines... We should not give the government the right to kill its citizens.
Yeah.
He says it's not about morality. It's not about justice. It's not about revenge. It's about
you don't trust your government.
He actually gives a whole bunch of really good arguments.
Yeah.
And then he says, the government can ask you to go to war. The government can ask you to fight for it. But the government cannot order you to die.
Yeah.
And maybe that is where you can't justify... Maybe that's why the superheroes bother me more. Because Aang kind of represents the government. Like, he is sort of...
He is the cosmic force of the universe. When he's in Avatar state, nothing stands a chance.
He is kind of the but more than that, like, he's a political figure. Like, he is the mechanism that keeps the four nations in check. Like, he is sort of like the commissar of Earth.
Yeah.
Or wherever their planet's called. Whereas these superheroes fighting serial killers are just people trying to survive.
Yeah.
And when you're in a struggle maybe that's what they're getting at. If you choose to be a superhero, maybe you're saying, I'm not going to kill as part of that. Whereas if you're a person struggling to survive, then go for it and like two-tap that serial killer just in case he gets back up.
Yeah. Batman chooses to throw himself into that every single time, and because that's his choice, he cannot kill people. However, when Darkseid shows up and there's parademons, Batman murders parademons. And it's not even like, oh, they're just aliens. Like, parademons actually have personalities and can communicate each other.
Because that's not Batman choosing who lives and who dies. That's Batman
Trying to survive.
defending Earth.
Like, in Batman... Superman versus Darkseid, where they had Supergirl, and Batman armed all the Hellspores on Darkseid's planet and was going to blow it up, kill himself, kill Superman, kill everyone. Batman was going to go through with that. And if Batman had the option there, he actually probably would have killed Darkseid. It's just Batman can't. But I think Batman would fully take the option every single time if he ever has Darkseid at his mercy to kill him.
So the thing the super villain does that these super villains that do nothing, it's this played for comedy scene where it's from the point of view of a trucker and he's driving along, and super villain knocks his car, stops it somehow, and she takes a shotgun and she like shoves it into his crotch and says, "Step out of the van." And so he walks out and she says, "Look, I'm not here to hurt you. You know, your company's shipping things insured. I'm just getting the money. Just we'll get along nicely," that sort of thing. You were talking about the situation where you kill someone to prevent someone else from being killed.
Yeah.
I think and I don't know where you stand on this, but pointing a gun at someone is not a light-hearted, joking activity.
No, it is not.
That is... You are saying, I am thinking about killing you.
Yes.
You're saying that is a very real possibility in the next few seconds that I plan to kill you. Like, you have a shotgun, you walk up to the truck, you say, "Get out." That is very different from pointing the shotgun at someone directly. And I might go so far as to say, and I'm not sure, but I might never sleep soundly again until the person who pointed a gun at me was dead.
Yeah.
And that alone might be reason for me to kill them. That doesn't mean I think the state should be the going out or that Batman should come along and kill them for me. But even if they are locked up in prison, I remember that this is a person that was willing to point a gun at me, and someday they'll be released from prison or they escape. And until the day they die, I will never feel safe. And they will have family, and if the family's anything like them, and they will have friends that apparently, based on the morals of that one person, would point a gun at you. So you want all their family and friends locked up or dead as well. And it's like, maybe that's a bit far for just pointing a gun at someone, but maybe not. Like, pointing a gun at someone is not a light joking thing that this comic made it to be.
Yeah.
And like, I think the Dresden Files handled that really well, where Fix points a gun at Dresden and he says, "I just wanted to talk with you and have a bit of insurance." And Dresden says, "We're not friends anymore. If you do that again, I will kill you." And,
No, like, everything, like, partly gun safety and training, but also the thought, like, the accident, you can kill the person, so there's that there, but also
it's the willing...
There is death with a gun point, like...
You have demonstrated you're willing to kill the person.
Yeah.
By a simple act of pointing the gun at them, I think.
Like, even an unloaded gun, part of the thing is, oh, it might not be loaded, or it might accidentally be blown, but even then, you're pointing a gun.
It's like... You could do the same thing with a knife. If you hold a knife to someone's throat,
yes,
you are saying, "I am willing to kill here."
Yes, battering to the eye.
Yeah. If you have a spear pressed against someone's heart, like the gun itself isn't magically the reason for this. If you're like a super strong person, you have someone's neck in a hold to break it. Like, you are saying, "I'm a person who
is in position,
has thought about it and has made the choice that I am willing to kill you."
Yeah.
And it's interesting how in a lot of cases, and this is where the definition of weapon comes in again, you see a lot that weapons are actually a way of saying, "I'm not willing to kill you."
Well,
because if you wanted to... You can look at this at a very different direction, right? You're walking in an alley. A guy comes up with a gun and points at you and says, "Give me your wallet."
Yeah.
And you say, "Wow, this guy was willing to kill me." But on the other hand, you walk into an alley, guy shoots you in the head, takes your wallet, goes on his merry way. Like, there is... You can look at it a lot more positively as well, I suppose. Yeah. And that they're not willing to kill you.
The Zweihander. Very, very weird weapon. Because it's kind of a polearm, but it's also a sword. If you look at it from a practical standpoint, its design is actually to fight polearms. Because a sword, like the thought, oh, I'll cut through the spear shaft, I'll cut through the halberd shaft. A sword will never do that. So right-handers can. And it's because they have a lot of momentum, and they're very heavy and they're very big. Now, how Zweihanders were used, though, is you had bodyguards who had Zweihanders. And they would swagger around with the Zweihander, like, propped on their shoulder. And let's say you're a nobleman, right? And you have your 2 Zweihander bodyguards, or even just one, like, you just need one. And this gang walks up, and they're being a bit threatening. So the guy with the Zweihander will put his sword in the ground, and shove you to the ground, and stand over top of you. Like, literally, you're flat on the ground, and he'll have his sword there. And it's like, okay. And the main way for a Zweihander to like get into a combat stance is they kick their sword so it flips upwards and then they hold it and then they start spinning above their head. The whole point of a Zweihander is do not mess with me or the person I'm guarding.
Right, it's meant to look intimidating.
And so most Zweihander mercenaries looked ridiculous by our standards. They had these giant hats with huge feathers. Their clothing were multicolored, very puffy.
Like the Landsknecht.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they were outrageously loud.
I think
so was their weapon. And the whole point of the Zweihander, like how it's practically used, or sorry, not how practically, how it was used was don't touch me. Like, I'm very big, I'm very masculine, I've got a very big sword, don't mess with me.
I think they also had like the highest fatality rate in combat or something. Like the shock troops, basically.
Yeah.
Obviously a bodyguard's going to be different, but...
Yeah. No, the actual Landsknecht definitely was high fatality. That's because they were charging pike walls. Their job was to break a pike wall.
Which takes a special kind of person to...
Special kind of drunk madness.
To want to do that. Well, I think I've got a bit of like a throat infection, so maybe we just wrap it up there, unless you got something you wanted to... Right. Okay.
Right.
Sure, so we can end it there?
Yeah.
Okay.